Welcome everyone. I call this meeting to order. August 5th, 2013. Good to see the crowd. I guess you heard that I'm just got a few more months on the job. You probably just came to see me in action. Is that what it is? We've got our agenda. We have July 1st and then I had that dinner meeting on July 30th. What says the board on those minutes? All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. In preparation for the first public hearing for the rezoning petition for East Main, Gaston Green, and West Palmer Street, I've got 5 names here, the folks who have signed up to speak. Not saying that if somebody feels the call, we might try to slip them in a little bit later, but it would be good if you could go ahead and get signed up if you're sure you want to speak. I want you to get right to the point. Tell us who you are and your connection to the matter where you reside or have your business, and we'd be glad to hear from you. That said, I'm going to go ahead and start the public hearing. It says 7:05. We won't be over by then, so if somebody comes in by then, they're not going to miss anything. So I'm going to declare the public hearing open for the rezoning petition by the town of Franklin for East Main Street, Gaston Green, and West Palmer. Derek? Not you, Hal, Derek. Rolling hot around up there?
Well, you're not here either.
Henny's not here, Derek's not here. You must be a rough crowd.
He was here. He went upstairs. It's not here. Yeah. Okay. He's taking it down.
All right. We're going to go ahead and give you all a chance to talk. Sometimes I get Derek to give us the executive summary. He'll be maybe in a minute. James Brian Parker. Stand up, sir. Sit over there at the microphone and talk to us.
Hey, my name is Brian Parker. I have property on Gaston Street. I own up to Gaston up to Lyle Street and down halfway down Lyle. Like I've said many times, I've been here a couple times. I have a couple of rentals. One on Gaston Street, I rented to this guy. I spent $5,000 on it. Put him in there 3 months later. He was too surprised, burned it to the ground. Like I said before, I'm not asking y'all to make it where I can put a piece of a mobile home or a piece of property that never has had a mobile home. All I'm going to do is replace the mobile home that burned down. Simple as that. Right now, I'm being held up, because it's zoned where if you own a mobile home in this zone, and for no fault of your own, somebody burns it down or it gets destroyed, you're not allowed to put it back. So now I have a water and a sewer tap sticking out of the ground on Gaston Street. All I want to do is replace it. Derek and Warren asked me to come and speak. Derek has expressed interest in changing the zoning where the balance of houses versus mobile homes in that area is greatly in the balance of mobile homes. There are more mobile homes there than there are houses. If you take a ride up through there, most of the dwellings there are mobile homes. That's all I'm asking, is just for the zoning to change where I can replace the mobile home that was destroyed through no fault of my own.
Thank you, Brian. Mr. Rowan, now that you're with us, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Can you come give us a quick executive summary on this?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Board, I apologize for my late arrival, boss. What you have in front of you tonight, it should be in your agenda package, 2 separate emails. And there's, in one email, there is 3 maps. that have been attached on a PDF. And if I'm not mistaken, Summer, map 2 in that email map 1 in the email is the rezoning petition that was submitted on behalf of the town of Franklin that we'll be discussing in the first public hearing. If you'll recall, what the premise of that rezoning is, the West Palmer Street corridor and a parcel on East Main Street that are currently zoned in the neighborhood mixed use category and the C1 category. That zoning is proposed for that to change from neighborhood mixed use and central commercial to secondary commercial. And to remind you what the implications of that are, it's simply the secondary commercial category opens those properties up to a broader range of commercial activity. In many instances, at different properties along this corridor, we went and inspected them and visited with the owners, and we got in a lot of situations where that these parcels that have been set up for automobile sales facilities, automobile repair facilities, and the like have been zoned to where that they're no longer conforming. In other words, if somebody's business license expires at a tire shop per our UDO, and it stays expired for more than 180 days, they can no longer open that shop back up for automobile repair, as it is non-conforming. Secondly, we have a lot of properties on that corridor that are box stores, like the Old Ingles, Ace Hardware, and the vacant piece of property that has nothing on it right now, but used to house the Franklin Motel. And as we look toward the future, and as we expect growth to come to the town of Franklin, and we hope to foster business and economic development and economic growth in the town of Franklin. Again, I will say that when you change this from neighborhood mixed use and central commercial to secondary commercial, those uses that are there now can continue, as well as more commercial activities will be then permissible to take place on these properties. And that is with the West Palmer Street portion and the portion on East Main Street. Going up to Green Street and Gaston Street, and what Mr. Parker was speaking here earlier, that particular section up there, when you forwarded this application down to the planning board at their July meeting, if you'll notice on that map, the areas in red are, one is on the northwest and one is on the west. The planning board wanted to move those boundaries, and in doing that, in this particular area, they feel that they're moving what will become, in the event you approve this rezoning, R2, they're moving that away from those areas that are primarily R1 and are developed with stick-built single-family dwellings on them. In doing that, the thought behind the planning board's recommendation is you're preserving the character of that neighborhood and keeping it and giving a little extra buffer from the R2, which is a more dense development, and to occur in an area that we've discussed, that we have went and looked at, and is 48% of the structures that are on these lots are currently manufactured homes or trailers, as found by the Macon County Tax Office. So not only are you benefiting that group of citizens in that area, such as Mr. Parker that has come here tonight and spoke of the home that burnt down and could not be replaced because it was non-conforming, you're also preserving the character by putting that little extra buffer in of those areas on Wilkie Street and Tremont Trail to the northwest and west.
Good, thank you. And the history, to get us up to tonight, what's been the quick history of this proposal?
The quick history of this proposal was we discussed it at our board retreat. And again, we had visited many parcels and areas along these corridors and in these places that were becoming non-conforming. due to the zoning classification that was in place at this time. And furthermore, we discussed at our board retreat that in zoning the West Palmer Street corridor C2, it matches up with the zoning that is in East Franklin right now, which is also zoned C2. And we felt that it would open that area on West Palmer Street up, have more potential businesses that are able to locate there and benefit not just one group of citizens, but the entire municipality, as well as the change on Green Street and Gaston Street. It conforms to our principles of growth in the way that it ensures that we offer a broad range of affordable housing opportunities to all the residents in the town of Franklin, and we're doing a service to those residents that have mobile homes on their property and is in an area that is right now denser development with 48% of the structures manufactured homes. And by moving those boundaries in, as the planning board did at their last meeting, they're ensured that the character of the neighborhoods that surround them remains R1 in nature as well.
Questions for Derek? Thank you, Derek. Stand by there, please. Carl Gillespie. Can you follow that?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Board. I'll be very brief. My name's Carl Gillespie. I own property on West Palmer Street that will be affected by this. I appreciate the board. I applaud the board, Warren, planning department, and the town planning board for taking this into consideration and looking at these changes that could have a positive impact on economic growth inside the town, city limits of Franklin, without doing anything that would hurt our town, our appearance, and the overall feel of our town. So I think this fits that criteria, and I would urge you to consider it.
Thank you, Carl. James Conley, Jr.
Thank you for considering this. I own property, me and my father own property on West Palmer Street. It's been zoned neighborhood mixed use. And if you look at it, it's obviously commercial property. Nobody's going to move down on that corner and want to build a house or put a doctor's office or an attorney's office there. So we appreciate it if you consider voting it back commercial like it was years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brady, you just signed up on the wrong page. Richard, I'll move you over to the, okay.
And you move me over to,
Debbie Land,
you just move me over to.
I'll move you both over.
Thank you.
And that's all I have. We got a few more minutes, especially if there's the naysayers who want to be heard. There's always two sides. Yes, sir.
My name is Mark Lathrop.
Come on up, sir. Mark?
My name is Mark Lathrop. I own property at 265 Green Street. And I'm concerned with what the difference is between the zoning. It seems to me like it's going to be a more dense type of area. And my concern is the level of traffic that we have already with such small confined roads.
Okay.
You know, if you start getting a more dense residential population, I mean, we don't even have a line on the road right now, you know, so.
It's challenging. Derek, answer the man.
When we say more dense, we're talking, the R1 has a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet, whereas the R2 has a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. And in R2, you are permitted to do multifamily dwellings and condominiums and such as that. But again, the lot size would have to accommodate that. And there's just not an instance where on Green Street and Gaston Street that there's going to be a lot that's able to accommodate, in this rezoning anyway, that would be able to accommodate something that would generate mass amounts of traffic. In other words, what basically this will permit that's not permitted there now is just to be able to place a manufactured home there. So you have, although it is more dense, you have parameters there like your setbacks. In other words, when you're talking about an acre lot, the R2 and R1 districts have the same setbacks. In other words, you got to be 25 foot off the front, 10 foot off the sides, and 15 foot off the back, if I'm not mistaken. You might want to check me on that. But regardless, you have things such as setbacks that's going to prohibit something that's just like a multi-family apartment complex. And again, even they're not. I mean, you can't get more than 6 bedrooms, a 6-bedroom unit on there. So it's not like apartments and things like that. And still, you have certain parameters within that UDO that would prevent something that would generate a mass amount of traffic through there. So it's basically still going to be, you can safe bet that it'll be single-family residential that comes in there.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Mark. Okay. There being no more speakers, on 7:15, I'll declare the public hearing closed. What I want to do, Board, if it's okay with you, I want us to go ahead and address this issue now. It will take about 5 minutes, because there's a lot of folks here, I'm sure, just for this one. And then we'll go to our next. So we'll move down to under 7A, Town Board decision on rezoning petition by the town of Franklin for East Main Street, Gaston Green, and West Palmer Street. What says the board?
I see no problem with it. I've talked with several of the owners of property in that area that I thought maybe have some objection to it, but I haven't found anybody that has objection to it. Just like Mr. Collins stated, that originally was what that was, and when the rezoning was done years ago, it just kind of changed things, but that's any type of programs, zoning areas, is always to look at later on down the road, and that's basically what we're doing. We're re-looking at it based on some situations that's happening.
That's a motion.
I would make a motion.
Mr. Mayor, before you entertain a motion, I would ask you to, that motion needs to be phrased particularly to, one, accept the planning board recommendation if it's the will of the board to accept that changed line, because that was the planning board's recommendation was slightly different. So please do that with your motion, as well as the motion should also include that the motion to adopt the zoning consistency statement and to amend the zoning.
I make a motion that we accept the planning board's recommendation on this, whatever else it was.
Consistency
Statement and amend the map.
Yes.
How we doing now?
That's
Okay.
you're there.
Second. Discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? So that passes. We're going to take about 2 or 3 minutes, just in case any of you want to get along with your regularly scheduled activities. You're certainly welcome to stay, but we do take a short break in case, because that'll take care of the Gaston Green, West Palmer Street. So, yeah.
Just bring it tomorrow. Just be careful with it.
Here it goes. All right. We're back in business, on the record, I guess. It says public hearing for rezoning petition by residents of Pauline Avenue. Mr. John Henning has some late breaking news.
Thanks for not giving my address. I appreciate it.
No, go ahead, John, stand up there so they can all hear you.
Mr. Mayor, and I apologize also for myself for having been late to the meeting. I would like to just say it's all Derek's fault. But the truth of the matter is, it comes down to, and we've been working through and talking about the sort of novel position that the board is in with this particular rezoning request, in that it included owners of properties that were not making application on their own behalf. Mr. Brady made application for several of them, and that triggers a requirement of actual notice to each and every one of those people. Actual notice, and Mr. Mayor, you're very familiar with these concepts, it is defined as either in-hand delivery, or it can be through mail, return receipt requested, restricted delivery, that sort of thing. And I would tell you, having gone through this as quickly as possible, that Mr. Brady made a very good attempt to get actual notice to each and every person on whose behalf he was making application. There was one property owner who refused service of the letter, and I cannot find any definition of service, of actual notice, that includes a refused letter. I don't believe it's sufficient to say she has actual notice.
Troubles.
It is, yes, sir. And on that basis, I can tell you for certain, you cannot hear and decide the rezoning application on that one particular property located at 54 Pauline Circle. I do not know, standing right here, whether it would be legal to proceed with the hearing on all of the others. And just the problem of the one being refused has the ring of a case book to me, and I don't want to be case law. So I would tell you that I think the safest route, and I know it's not going to be popular, and I hate to have people feel like we've wasted anybody's time, but it's what the law is going to require. The safest route would be for the board to reschedule the public hearing for your September 3rd meeting, 7:05, and for notice to be, there are methods now possible after having made due diligence, attempt to get mail, service by mail to this person, to do it by publication. That would then, we would be able to consider all those properties. But that's my advice to the board.
So they wouldn't have to re-serve the ones who's already been served, because it's just basically a rescheduling.
I believe that's true.
And you do believe that there is an actual, like, posting or something? I mean, one person can't stop everything just because
Correct.
they won't answer the door.
It's by publication. And it has to run 3 times, 3 consecutive weeks prior to the hearing.
You want to get that done between now and the 3rd of September, I think.
Well, it might have to be October. I don't know. I have not had an opportunity to look at that sort of logistical question.
Is it 3 months of publication?
I believe it is 3 consecutive weeks
Of publications?
of publication prior.
Can't put it in the hands of one of our finest to let them deliver.
Yeah.
Well, and it does not have to be by publication. If other actual notice by some other means is accomplished between now and then, that'll be all well and good.
And is this in Franklin that it's been turned away? The person who refused to take it, is this person living in Franklin or elsewhere?
I think I don't know exactly.
Is it 3 consecutive weeks or 3 consecutive issues?
It's usually weeks.
I believe it's weeks.
It's usually weeks in the legals. So you're at, I mean, if we're gonna have to consider publication, getting it for the September 3rd is too early. So you have to give enough time probably between the last publication and the hearing, probably 10 days.
Imagine you're correct. That being the case, it might be the best option to reschedule for the October meeting.
There's several folks here I know for this very issue. John standing up. It's a legal quandary that right now we don't feel comfortable going forward because we feel we have insufficient service on one of the persons involved. And it's an issue we don't want to have to look back behind once we settle it and it can be resolved, but it's gonna take a continuance, it sounds like, until the October session, doesn't it? To be safe about getting the timing on the publication. Unless we knew for sure otherwise. Mr. Brady, you with us, sir? No, we're not, this isn't a public hearing.
Right. The publication, though, is that the newspaper ads that was in the newspaper on 2 occasions that included this person's name and address? Not sufficient notice? What's the purpose of the advertisement in the newspaper?
The purpose of the advertisement in the newspaper would apply and did apply to all of the other rezonings that we're looking at. It would apply to any garden variety rezoning if just your application on your own property.
Because the bootstrap you use to the folks who really didn't apply themselves,
Yes.
you put it on the team, all those have to be.
It triggers a special requirement.
As far as, you're phrasing the bootstrap, it's what's legal.
I'm not saying, we want to keep it legal, that's fine.
I have that right to do that.
Right.
I was dealing with the sensitive time frame. That's the purpose of doing that. We had 32 property owners that was involved. 16 responded by the deadline date that I filed everything. The other 16 initially did not. 7 of those 16 did respond after the filing of the paperwork. 1 more called, so that's a total of 8. So we're at 75% of the property owners that responded were in favor.
Mr. Brady, we're not going to argue with the council. The council says we're not able to go forward tonight. And we're going to take, I'm assuming we're going to take his advice.
Yes.
And so,
He knows more.
Whose responsibility is it going to be to notify this individual? I'm quite disturbed, Mr. Mayor. This is the first time I heard about this tonight.
I think it's.
I was at town hall today at 3:45, 4 o'clock,
Okay,
and turned in the paperwork,
okay.
all right?
All right, that's understandable, but that doesn't make it that we can change it.
And Ms. Brady, I would tell you, we're dealing with a fairly onerous requirement of state law that is not the choice of this board, or certainly myself. But it is what it is.
So whose responsibility is it going to be to put the publication in the newspaper for 3 consecutive weeks and notify this individual?
I suspect the petitioner.
I mean, somebody needs to give me direction. I've done as well as I have done with no direction at all, by just reading the information that's available. So, I just need someone to tell me, and I'll, if you're going to do it, or I'm going to do it, or it's got to be delivered by a police officer, or whatever.
Mr. Mayor, the town staff has been, I think, trying, I would, from my perspective, trying to help accomplish service, and we continue to do so.
All right. I know you're upset, Mr. Brady, but you can't change our decision. If we've got a legal counsel who studied it, it'd be foolish not to take his advice. We want something that will withstand any scrutiny. If it means a couple more months, I suspect in the overall scheme of things, that's not too long.
Well, actually, what's the point, Mr. Mayor, it's just delaying.
Well, do you have a suggestion, Ms.
No, but I mean, really.
Just delaying it, right?
Yes,
That's all it is, it's just
Yeah,
being delayed, that's
absolutely.
all.
Okay. And with the delay process, is there anything that can assure the 75% of the population that's interested in favoring this rezoning to prevent any individual from doing something to the properties that are potentially capable of being changed?
They would, at the very soonest, they would get an application in that could be submitted in September. The board could forward it to if they wanted to, and they may not. The board would not have to forward another rezoning application while all of this is pending. And I would probably advise them at that point not to consider one in the meantime.
The status quo will maintain.
Chances are, I don't think it would be unusual. I don't believe it's going to happen.
Just when can I make an appointment to meet with someone to follow up on who's going to
Just
do
take
that?
care of that during our regular business hours. But not right now, sir. Okay.
I'll be in touch with you.
Is September, you want to say something?
I wasn't served. I'm Bruce Kohler, 217 Bowling Avenue. I was, as owner of that property, one of the 2 owners, I was not served. So that's another reason not to, due diligence wasn't done.
Have you been served yet?
No.
Don't leave.
Mr. Mayor, Garrett Jones Kohler was served
She is one of the owners, and that was to her personally. To
Okay,
her personally.
all right,
Okay.
October or
Okay.
September?
October.
October?
Just make sure this happens.
Tables,
Yeah.
move it
Let's
on
get it done that
October.
way.
That motion there,
Second,
7:05.
7:05, October. Second.
All in favor, raise your hands. We'll take another quick break.
Thank you.
Get them straight.
You playing rotary?
Okay, just like the government, we'll start our 7:15 public hearing at 7:35. That's to, application to amend text only of the UDO for regulating the location of electronic machines and sweepstakes. Eric, the floor is yours.
Sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This application to amend the text of the Unified Development Ordinance was suggested by the town of Franklin to amend Chapter 152, Section 28B, which is the highway commercial permitted uses, to regulate the location of electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes as defined by North Carolina General Statute 14-306-4. This the original application that came before you, which you forwarded down to the planning board, only contained the text amendment to Chapter 152, Section 28B, and it just said electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes. And that was what had gotten forwarded down to the planning board. When it got to the planning board, and as the planning board began discussing it, they recognized that we would need to take some more steps merely than just to include this use into Section 28B. Because for one, we did not include a definition of these. We alluded to the general statute, but we never formally put it into our ordinance. So we amended Chapter 152, the planning board recommended to amend Chapter 152, Section 10C of the Town of Franklin Unified Development Ordinance, and this is the definition section, to include electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes. And the definition is going, as proposed, will be similar to on the original application, any device defined in North Carolina General Statute Chapter 14, Section 306.4, or any video game displayed on an electronic machine dependent on skill or dexterity of the player to reveal a prize. Furthermore, the planning board recommended to amend Chapter 152, Section 123 of the UDO to impose special requirements on electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes similar to those that are currently being imposed on private clubs. And this would read, shall not be located within a 500-foot radius of another establishment housing electronic machines and devices for sweepstakes, nor within 250 feet of a residential use or residential zoning classification. And the planning board, following these recommendations, went through the 5 considerations that the UDO has listed that they should consider with any legislative decision such as this one. And they found it to be consistent with the principles of growth, reasonable, and in the general public interest of all those within the town of Franklin. So that's where we stand right now. The application you sent down, the planning board made the recommendation to include further amendments, as I've just discussed, to the original, and that is what is being presented back before you tonight at this public hearing for your consideration.
All right, thank you. So I'll call the public hearing in the session on this issue. A lot of room on this page. If anyone's here to speak, pro or con, they're welcome to. That said, there being no speakers, we'll declare the public session closed and go back in and put it before the board. You suggested the 500-foot limit between
Yes,
establishments.
that is what is currently being used in our Unified Development Ordinance in terms of private clubs. And the planning board just took that recommendation, or that requirement, since it already is listed in our UDO for consistency purposes, and applied it to these sweepstakes devices as well.
I think the idea, Mr. Mayor, would be to prevent a situation where people would locate into one particular place and then you'd have, private club row or, little.
Kind of like Reno with all the casinos.
Little Vegas, really little Vegas.
I can understand.
That's a good explanation, Derek. I wasn't quite sure what we were doing, but I am now, so.
All right, I've had my second, yeah. What's the board think?
I make a motion that we pass the ordinance that the planning board has put together for us
And what else, John?
And adopt the consistency statement.
and adopt the consistency statement.
Back in a second.
Yes.
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. None opposed, okay. Derek alerted me, I'm glad Mr. Brady stayed with us, because you had to, it was a matter you want to bring before the board that really isn't on the agenda.
Yes, sir, and I apologize for that. That's my fault.
Well, that's not looking at fault, but it was, tell me what it is. 'cause-
Well, it's basically in the rezoning petition that was submitted by the residents of Pauline Avenue and Mr. Richard Brady. There were 5 parcels that had been left out of that application. And that, in other words, what that means is, in the event this does get rezoned to R1, these 5 parcels that are located within this rezoning that we're currently discussing will remain R2 in many instances. In fact, as I distribute this to the board, you can see 3 of them right off the bat in the middle of that blue there. And there's another one above Pauline Avenue, and then one on the northwest corner that would make a square out of that top part there. How do you like my explanations?
It's wonderful.
Why? Explain why.
Yeah,
Is this
tell
the
me.
ones that are in dispute right now?
Yes, this does not have anything to do with the rezoning that we're discussing currently
Oh,
with
okay.
Pauline Avenue. It is, if Pauline Avenue, what you're seeing there in the blue is the rezoning that we're currently discussing, that we voted to postpone till October. Those that remain yellow inside of it are the 5 parcels that were not, that had failed to, an application to get submitted for. Whether the individual owners didn't submit one, or the ones that Mr. Richard Brady was submitting an application on behalf of, he neglected to include those in there. Now he wishes, and there's, out of the 5 applications, 2 have been submitted by Richard Brady. The others were from the original property owners. And it's 1.29 acres, and again, it's on Pauline Avenue. And it would be, at this point, what you would be doing is initiating this process and recommending this down to the planning board for further discussion.
Well,
Tonight?
You would be recommending it down tonight,
if we needed to.
if you chose to.
Pardon?
We talked about these 4,
5.
Yes, sir.
I see,
And then there's one on the very northwest corner up there. That one right there.
and I mean, would we even consider a block of rezoning when leaving those pockets?
Well, you wouldn't, I think it would, I mean, it would bring everything,
Together to do it all.
it would bring
That's what I'm
everything
thinking, does it
together.
take the planning board to tell us that? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I guess it has to go back to the
It
planning board.
has to.
Video requires it.
Oh,
If you're gonna have a hearing on it, you have to, it has to be.
Yeah.
Okay, if we do this,
Yeah.
I mean, this goes to the planning board, now we've moved it up to October, right?
This would be a separate,
Okay, so that, is it going to take longer than to October?
if you recommend this at Kimber, and what could happen is that both of these come to fruition on the same night in October. If you hold that other public hearing to October, then we could be talking instead of the rezoning of what would now be 37 parcels, but it would be 2 separate applications, and it would all be done at one time in October.
yeah, it needs to be.
Makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Motion for the plans.
Move forward.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. That give us that. You understand, Mr. Brady? If you do, you can tell me, okay?
I do.
Okay.
That'll work
I'm in on that one.
Who made that motion, Mr. Mayor?
Billy did.
Billy did.
All right.
Glass looks half full.
Look, get through this.
There we go.
Moving on. You're doing a fine job, Derek. Fine job.
Okay, public session. Dan, you signed up. New subject matter, please.
I needed to go to the hardware store and I needed to go to Ingles, so I thought I'd take a little ride over there. And on the way, I see 3 guys from the city standing on the sidewalk. And they got the city truck there and they're standing on the sidewalk, and I thought, how wonderful. You know, I've been begging you all for over a year now. Maybe you all get the sidewalk cleaned up, and I figured you got 3 guys that ought to take about 15 minutes to do the job. So off I go to the hardware and back to Ingles. About an hour later, I'm coming back and there's the same 3 guys still standing there watching the cars go by. There's your truck still there. Nobody ever thought about picking up any garbage or anything. And yeah, but it killed them guys. Spent 15 minutes working. I guess nobody told them to do anything. So I guess they weren't motivated enough to pick up any garbage or do any work. You kind of wonder what they do 40 hours a week. You think they get bored silly out there. And I just wondered, what's the cost to have a truck out there and 3 guys stand there all day? I don't know how long they were there, but I don't know, I was gone for an hour. They hadn't done nothing in an hour. And yeah, would it kill them and pick up a little bit of wood? I like that. I like the whole job I'm talking about would take about an hour. You know, they had the truck and a couple guys, and we're talking about picking up some sticks and stuff down Dogwood Drive and around the block. And I don't know why you got any guys in the payroll that don't want to work. Maybe you get people who do want to work, you know, people that are motivated. Maybe they can think of things on their own, things to do, things that got to be done. Yeah, good thing they're not farmers, you know. They have to wait for somebody to tell them what to do every day. They wouldn't make it, would they? And
Point taken.
I hope Tom gets on the board. Boy, I've been, there's a big old pothole in front of his yard. And I've been 20 years begging to get that pothole fixed. Nobody's done it yet. I don't know how you get it fixed, but, and maybe we get Dogwood Drive cleaned up a little bit. That'd be nice. I can't seem to get nothing done. I've been up here for over a year begging, and y'all don't hear me, you know. Oh,
Dan, I believe we were out there just not long ago.
Thanks for nothing so far, you know, but I'll keep begging.
Dan, someone's talking to you.
Dan,
Dan.
I believe we were actually out there not long ago cleaning up some of the stuff.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've
yes.
got pictures of the staff.
All right.
Forgot to do any work if we were out there. Thanks for coming out to do some work next time.
7D on your program.
Say
I'm
crap, been there
I'm
for
glad you
2
showed
years
up
now.
tonight, because if you hadn't have been here, it'd been a tough meeting.
It's all right, bill's in the mail.
Street maintenance ranking system. Who's number 1?
I guess I'll actually start and I'll defer off to Derek, Mr. Mayor. One of the things, we've been talking a lot about infrastructure for our sewer and water system, and one of the things we haven't talked about a lot since I've been here is our street maintenance, and as far as
other issues as far as keeping track of those and coming up with a, I guess for lack of a better term, a list of what needs to be done as far as particularly as repaving, resurfacing, the genuine true maintenance, not picking up the sticks, but the true maintenance of the infrastructure. And one of the things we didn't really have was a good system of going by and deciding which street needs to be repaved this year. We're limited on the amount of Powell bill funds, which are now mobility funds the governor has renamed, as far as what we can do with that each year. So I talked to Derek, and Derek actually developed a form for us that I've got in your package tonight that takes into consideration 4 different things. Basically what would happen is your staff would take some sort of a program such as this or a policy such as this, go out and look at your streets and evaluate them based on these 4 criteria. The 4 criteria are, number one, the one with the most weight is the current condition of the street. Is it poor? Is it good? Has it just been resurfaced? It also takes a look at the usage. How heavy is the usage? How much traffic is on the street? And there's some definitions on here. You'll notice that there are some streets that have a lot of usage, and these definitions come out of our UDO so that they match up with stuff that we've already done in the past. So we tie all our policies back together. Then we look at maintenance. We look at, when was the last time we've been out there? Were we there 5 years ago? Were we there 2 years ago? Has it been 20 years since we've been there? And then it also takes into consideration other things, for instance, length of time. You may have a small street that has very low usage and it doesn't get torn up a lot because there's not much usage on it. And it may have been 20 years since it's been resurfaced. But you have a heavy use street that has a lot of damage to it. It's been resurfaced 2 years ago. We want to make sure we take into consideration some of the secondary, what I call secondary streets, the streets that don't really have a lot of traffic on, so those folks get taken care of in our system. So basically what I was after was coming up with a ranking system, which hopefully you all could bless and allow our staff to go out possibly next month, ride through the streets, look at the streets, figure out the ones that we think need the work and evaluate them for their current condition. And come up with a ranking system to bring back to you hopefully in September, let you look at the numbers, and then by that time you'll have had a chance to go look at them. And at that point you can say, well, that actually works pretty well, but let's adopt this list for our priorities for the next year, next 2 years, next 3 years. And what that will do is it does a couple of different things. Number one, it will let people know where their street is at in the process. They'll be able to look at it and say, well, yeah, I'm 2 years down on the list. It'll keep people up to speed on where they're at. Plus, it gives us some budgetary constraints to work with, so we know, okay, this year if we can afford 3 streets, these are the 3 that we're going to be able to do. The top 3 are, if they're very long streets, maybe we can only do 2 of them. But it helps us in the budgetary process when we budget those Powell bill funds every year, come up with some figures by which to address these streets. Now, one of the things that most folks don't realize, a lot of the major arterial streets that we have coming going out of town are actually maintained by the DOT. They're not maintained by the town of Franklin. Walya Street comes to mind. Walya Street definitely needs some work on it, but that's actually a DOT maintained street. One of the other issues that you all don't have, that the County Board of Commissioners has, is a way to actually present information to the DOT officially to say, these are the ones we think you need work on. You talk to them, you have meetings with them, but what the other thing Derek and I were thinking about was in addition to feeding in the states, or the city streets, also feed in the state maintained streets on a different list. Bring that list back to you all, and at that point you all could approve that list and say, forward these on to DOT, this is where we think they need to pay attention to, and have a voice for you to send that message officially to DOT to get your consideration. One of the things that I don't want to happen is I much prefer a scientific approach as opposed to the squeaky wheel gets the grease type of procedures. I don't want certain streets to get more attention than others just because you have somebody that constantly comes and talks to you and says, we need to fix this, need to fix this, need to fix this. while the quiet folks over here are suffering in silence on something that nobody's really paying attention to because we didn't know about it. So essentially this, what I'd like for you to do is look at this as a tool and possibly give us 30 days to go through and run through and develop a list with and come back to you, and you can always change the list. We can bring you the list and say, here's where we think our top 10 are. You have every right to look at them and say, no, we don't think that's right. We can change them some other way. But essentially, I'm asking you for consideration of that tonight. Derek actually can explain we've got a spreadsheet that he's got up on the computer that you feed the numbers in, and it weights all the averages, and we come up with a very scientific way of numbering those.
Great idea, Derek.
This is boss's idea.
You're going to explain.
I just couldn't write the program.
So what do you need from us? Just the head nod right now?
Yes, please. And then at least give us 30 days to put the numbers in, bring them back to you next month and say, based on what you did last month, this is what we come up with. Do you like it?
We all right with that, board?
Do you plan on just kind of zoning the town out and doing kind of zoning the time, or do you plan to look at every street?
We're going to do every one of them. If we're going to do them, we need to do
Let's
every
take a
one.
bet. Don't tell us. Let's take a bet right now. Let's figure out how many streets we got in town. Take a guess.
I have no idea.
What's your definition of street?
Well, it's got a name on it. It's got a name on it. I'm saying 75.
I don't know number, but you have 26.88 miles.
Okay. It's amazing.
156.
Yeah, 4.
Okay. Thank you.
26.81.
Stay with us, Derek. Growth zone analysis waterfall. What do you know about that?
Well, not much, but I did sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Oh, okay. This,
He's been here too long.
yes, it's getting punchy. This is an executive summary.
Too much vacation.
I got I'll distribute just a draft copy of the report to you. Get the labels printed. So
We'll have to just
guess which side's the front, flip it on those. It had water on it.
beautiful walls. Where's that?
Let me find it here. I've got a PowerPoint to accompany that. And like you were saying, Mr. Mayor, we'll get through this as quickly as possible. What you have in front of you here tonight is the Town of Franklin Growth Zone Analysis and Policy Recommendation Report. And just like the questions you've already asked, you know, why did the Town of Franklin initiate this planning effort when W.K. Dixon came last month and submitted their water study? Well, we're going to go a little bit into the why that we embarked on this study in the first place, as well as talk about some of the ways that it's similar to the report provided by W.K. Dixon and some of the ways that it's different. The main ways that it's different is the growth zones that we highlighted, and that are the meat and potatoes of this report, as well as how we arrived at the estimated usage requirements within these growth zones. And after we discuss this, which I say again is the meat and potatoes of this report, we're going to, the staff will ask you to move forward with some next steps, and we'll tell you where we plan on heading with this from here if the board sees fit.
Who's we? Who's working with you on this?
Myself, the Water and Sewer Committee, the manager, the Public Works Director, Mr. Jay Gibson. It's really an effort that is not just started last month or last week. We started this back in January, and we've been discussing it and going over it and looking into it, and we really feel like we came up with something good here that we would like for the board to consider asking us to move forward with. What this is a second approach. If you'll look and remember back, when W.K. Dixon came to us last month, the report that they provided for us was they based our water demands for the future on population projections. And that's exactly what they did. They looked at the population now and what it was expected to be in 2035 and the growth we would accrue during that time period. And based on that growth, that's how they hit their numbers with respect to demand. Now, the study area that W.K. Dixon used was the city limits, and as again highlighted from the report, it says the town anticipates the need to continue the expansion of its water system to serve all areas inside and outside its extraterritorial jurisdiction. The way that this plan differs from the report provided to you by W.K. Dixon, not only we did not use population as in terms of forecasting the demand for water we would have in the future, and we'll get into that later, nor did we anticipate the need to expand our water system to all areas inside and outside the ETJ. And the reason for that is uncertainty. There's uncertainty with respect to the General Assembly on the future of the extraterritorial jurisdictions. If you look at recently enacted legislation, General Statute 168, Section 54, with the involuntary annexation, that was the referendum requirement that they put on involuntary annexation. If you go back to the 2011-2012 session, House Bill 1043 recommended or proposed that municipalities having a population of 25,000 or less must get permission from the Board of County Commissioners before they enforce any land use regulations in the ETJ. In this session, House Bill 264 was proposed that eliminated the ETJ concept altogether. And going back again to the 11 and 12 session, Senate Bill 949 proposed to eliminate Boone's extraterritorial jurisdiction altogether. And with uncertainty in the General Assembly, there's also uncertainty in the statement in the W.K. Dixon plan to anticipate the continued expansion into the entire ETJ and outside of the ETJ as to what the stance that the town has taken on this in the past. And if you look at our principles of growth, it talks about things such as walkable communities, directing communities to grow vertically rather than horizontally. It talks about principle number 7 in particular, says direct development towards existing communities. And under that principle of growth, it makes the statement, the citizens of Franklin have made significant investments in town infrastructure. The town of Franklin should direct new development toward existing communities already served by this infrastructure. So what I get out of that is a spirit of trying to bring growth in, trying to prevent sprawl development, and trying to utilize town resources in close proximity to the boundaries of the town. But again, this does not meant to discredit the report by W.K. Dixon. We merely wanted to take a second approach, look at it from a different angle, as I'm about to describe to you right now, because at the end of the day, it's going to be, we've noticed a $23 million expenditure if we do decide to move forward with the expansion of the water plant. And that's a lot of money on burning down, Mr. Mayor. But anyway, perhaps the most important reason is that we recognize the precious resource that water is. Not only does it sustain life, it sustains economic development. If you look on the Macon County EDC website right now, you'll see in big bold letters the website that they use to bring businesses to the town of Franklin. That water and sewer is available in the town of Franklin. And who do they direct all comments and all contact information to? The town of Franklin. So we do have a precious resource here, and it is a resource that we wanted to consider all angles when we're planning for the future. And although we took a different approach, as I said before, W.K. Dixon used population growth, the town of Franklin used land use as a means of projecting the demand that we could anticipate in the future. Our study area was much more confined than W.K. Dixon's. Again, we did not get into the entire ETJ and areas outside of the ETJ. If you'll notice, and as you thumb through this report and you get a chance to familiarize yourself with it, it really embodies the principles of growth, the same principles that our UDO was adopted under, and we feel confident that you'll recognize that as you're reading it through. But perhaps the most important thing and the biggest similarity between the two reports, and this is why that each of these reports it's no more clearly illustrated here than how this is just expected to be another way of looking at things in a different angle. both reports, regardless of how we projected, regardless of if we used population growth or the land use, regardless of the study area, both concurred on the need for a 1 million gallon a day expansion of the water treatment facility. The growth zones. If you'll look in Appendix B of your report, and that is, again, is the back page, I'll see if I can pull that up. And I apologize, I'll have to thumb back through the slideshow there, but it should be coming up on the screen so everyone can have a chance to look at it. You'll see, and it's kind of cut off due to the screen size here, but Zone 1 is the municipal limits. In other words, that's our municipality right now. That's the established city limits that we have for the town of Franklin. And Zone 2 is the growth zone. And when we looked at establishing this growth zone, we took into consideration many different factors to be able to draw this boundary line. One of which we used was the footprint of the extraterritorial jurisdiction. We recognize that the extraterritorial jurisdiction, for the most part, follows our major highway corridors that provide ingress and egress out of the municipality. So we stuck by that as close as we could, as well as the proximity of these different locations where the boundary would encompass to the major intersections of the major highway corridors. 441 South, right there at Franklin Plaza. We looked at that one. We went out on Sloan Road. These are the intersections that have the highest traffic counts. And we wanted to be sure to include those areas in our growth zone. As I've stated before, we looked at the UDO, the principles of growth. We pulled definitions from the Unified Development Ordinance to help us establish this boundary. One in particular was the definition of a major and minor subdivision. A minor subdivision is 5 lots or less. And to be a minor subdivision, the parcel has to be less than 5 acres. So when we were drawing this boundary, we said, well, what in terms of residential is going to more than likely require municipal services? That was those parcels that are zoned residential greater than 5 acres that are suitable to have a major subdivision on, and that large-scale, high-intensity residential development. We also looked at vacancy. The parcels that we used when looking at this boundary met this criteria, plus they were vacant. And when we say vacant, we mean either not having a building on them or having 2 buildings that were valued by the tax office at $5,000 or less. Also included in this criteria, we took into consideration the zoning of the properties that we were drawing the boundary for the growth zone. And the zoning here, we recognize that the commercially zoned properties, of course, are going to have the commercial development. They're vacant. So we know that those properties are more than likely going to require municipal water in the future. We understand that, as I've stated before, the residential properties, those that were larger than 5 acres, are more than likely suitable for major subdivision, large-scale development. So this, again, was another criteria that we took into consideration when establishing these boundaries. And when we put all this together, we established the boundary that you see up here now, and that's contained in Appendix B of your report. And as you'll notice, it is a lot more condensed version of the extraterritorial jurisdiction. And getting back now, when we established the boundary, then we had to look at what was inside these boundaries. We got the city limits here, we're calling it Zone 1. We got this growth zone here, we're calling it Zone 2. So let's look at the properties inside the boundaries, because that's how we're going to determine the future demand that we're going to need inside here. So we looked at parcels that were vacant. We used the same criteria that we did in establishing the boundary. They either had nothing on them or 2 buildings or less that were valued at less than $5,000 by the Macon County Tax Office. But here, we used a 1-acre parcel size because we've established our boundaries, we've established the outer limits, but when it comes to inside, these vacant parcels that are 1 acre or larger are suitable for residential or commercial development inside these boundaries. So we reduced that size to 1 acre. Then we looked at the zoning classification, which you'll see here over this chart. At the end of the day, we had 784 vacant parcels that met our definitions that were 1 acre or greater inside this growth zone that encompassed 1,533 acres. That was the numbers that we came up with at the end. Out of this acreage, the green bars, the C1, C2, C3, and I1 had accounted for 603 acres. That's where all your commercial development of any type is going to take place inside those zoning classifications. Your neighborhood mixed use and your medical, institutional, cultural, and residential, 109 acres. Your R2 accounted for 193 acres. Your R1 accounted for 628 of the 1,533 acres that the parcels that met these criteria inside the growth zones accounted for. Now, once we had these parcels and once we had this acreage and we knew what was inside our growth zones, we had to come up with a way to estimate future demand. And what we went to for this was the North Carolina Administrative Code. And this is used by architects, engineers. Mr. Ritter's here. I spoke with him a time or two on what he uses for flow rates when he's doing his work. He then recommended me to a couple engineers who had given me the same answer as to what they used. And they used this North Carolina Administrative Code to determine flow rates. And now if you'll remember, we have our parcels. And now it says for residential parcels, you figure 120 gallons per day per bedroom. For commercial properties, it says you figure 880 gallons per acre where the types of use and occupancy are not known. So we don't know what type of commercial development is going to be there, whether it's going to be a manufacturing facility, whether it's going to be a doctor's office. We don't know the type of commercial use. So we defer to the North Carolina Administrative Code that says for any commercial use you don't know, you use a flow rate of 880 gallons per acre.
Per day.
Yes. So what we got here is a formula. And you'll notice in the top, the C1, C2, C3, and I1. If you'll remember, we had 603 acres. We applied the 880 gallons per acre per day to that number. For the neighborhood mixed use, medical, institutional, cultural, residential, if you'll remember, these two zoning classifications promote a mixture of commercial and residential development. You can have a doctor's office in there that's going to require 880 gallons per acre per day, or you can have a residence in there, a single family, that's going to require 360 gallons a day. So we divided it in half. We said half of the 109 acres we're going to devote to commercial development, 880 gallons per day. The other half, we're going to say a 3-bedroom house is going to locate on there. We'll get that 360 gallons per day. Then we go down to the R2, 193 acres. As we discussed in the rezoning hearings here tonight, your R2 is more dense. We figured 6 bedrooms per acre on the R2 rather than the 360 we used in R1. We came up with 720 gallons per day by 193 acres. Then for the R1, 628 acres, we figured a 1-bedroom house per acre. That's 360 gallons per day. What we came up with was an estimated usage under this scenario that I've just described of 963,260 gallons a day. If you'll look here, the red illustrates the C1, C2, C3, and I1. That is the amount of usage that will be coming from those zoning classifications. Your neighborhood mixed use, medical, institutional, cultural, residential, 67,580. R2, 138,960, and your R1 will be demanding 226,080 gallons a day. Then we used another scenario, and what was unique about this scenario is that we said all the properties, no matter what they're zoned, within 400 feet of a major highway corridor on either side, we're going to assume that we rezone that in the future to accommodate commercial development, that we're just growing at a rate that we're proud to grow, and we're going to rezone this so commercial development can locate on these corridors. So in doing that, commercial development stayed the same because it can't get any higher. We left it 880 gallons per day. neighborhood mixed use, medical, institutional, cultural, residential, we assumed all that was going to develop commercial and took the residential requirement out. And we just said the whole 109 acres is going to go commercial. Then for the R2, it had 5 acres that when we put those 400-foot boundaries on the corridors that would be located in an area that could potentially be zoned commercial one day. So we applied the 880 gallons per day to that 5 acres and left the remaining 188 at 720. Then for the R1, we had 242 acres that lied within 400 feet of a major highway corridor on either side. We applied the 880,000 gallon per day figure to that. Was an estimated usage of 1,118,240 gallons per day. And one thing that's flawed on this chart right off the bat, when you see 351,920, you can assume about 125,000 of that is going to be commercial, because that's when we applied those figures, we never adjusted the chart. So technically about another quarter of that should be red. And that's the biggest difference, but I just wanted to point that out to you. But you can see how that under that scenario, which is a far more liberal estimate, we arrive at a figure of 1,118,240 gallons per day. And together, we get an average of right at 1 million gallons per day, which is right where W.K. Dixon came in. I'll just remind you again that we took a little different approach. We took a different way of looking at it. Each of these reports, as I've sit up here and mentioned, they concur on the need for a 1 million gallon facility a day. All ours is saying is that this is where that we feel the growth is going to be, that we need to focus this 1 million gallons a day towards.
You say we need 1 million gallons a day. Are you saying we need 1 million extra gallons?
1 million extra, and that's another thing. The W.K. Dixon projected out to 2035. By taking this land use and using land use, then we're saying we don't care if the growth comes 5 days from now, 5 years from now, or 50 years from now. This is what the land is going, as we have it zoned, is going to allow to locate on this piece of property. And so therefore this is all it can be. No matter when it comes, it's what it can be.
And they're saying right now, we have really the capacity of getting how many gallons a day out of our treatment facility?
The flow study out there indicates we can do 3.1 million gallons per
But
day.
how much can we actually process?
Right now, we can do 2.
Have we ever done 2?
We've never done
1.8 maybe?
Yeah, it's between 1 and 2-ish.
Okay. And our average flow is
It's a little over 1.1, 1.2, somewhere in there. And I guess I'll let Derek rest for a minute because he's talking about tonight. I'm a big proponent of planning. When we did the street stuff there a few minutes ago, Derek and I met with Joyce and Sissy, our liaisons for the streets, and we sat down and we said, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be in 10 years or 20 years? How do you want this to come out so that we develop something that's not just good for tomorrow, it's good for a couple years down the road? We even talked about sidewalks. We said, maybe after we do streets, we ought to put sidewalks in there and do the same formula for them. And I'm a big believer in making your plans well in advance so that you're not surprised by stuff and you take the best interest of the town to heart, not just 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road and 30 years down the road. We need to plan for the future. Essentially what we have done with this, and Derek has put a lot of work into these figures, we have essentially backed into the numbers that W.K. Dixon has provided for you as far as what we think we're going to need for water supply. Could be tomorrow, could be 30 years down the road. We're not looking at that time frame. Essentially, I guess what we're asking for you to do tonight is to accept this as an informational document, a planning document, with the stipulation that over the period of the next probably 3 to 4 months, no later than probably December or January, we need to get a really good grasp on both of these studies and have some really good direction down as far as what we want to look for in a future water treatment facility. Now, are we going to build one this year? No. But we've got to get those plans laid out And even if we get started and we get into it next year and we look at the budget and we do a fiscal study on our water rates and we realize, we started this direction, but we can't pay for it. If we don't start that now in the next few months, we're just pushing stuff off that's inevitable. So essentially, I guess what we're asking for tonight is to take this information that Derek has provided for you, accept it as informational purposes, and understand that over the next period, couple months, we have some work to do. We have the sewer and water liaison folks need to sit down and have some really good input into that, and we need to maybe even have another work session with the board come closer to fall and really get our feet wet, for lack of a better term, with the water issues that we're going to have to deal with and get this thing started so that when we come into next budget year, we're making an educated decision on what we can do. And we may have to wait another year. If we can't fund it, that's a lot of money. That's a huge amount of money for a municipality our size to actually pay for it. So we have got to have the financial end, and I'm sure Janet will appreciate it more if we have that together first. But we've got to get all of that stuff together before we can think about turning one shovel full of dirt.
So the county has to be a player in this.
One of the things I think you need to do is I think you as a board need to grasp your hands around this concept first. This is your water system, this is your city. You decide what you need for this city. You decide where you want your growth to go in the city. Then we'll see what we can afford and what our capacities are. Then we talk to those folks and say, okay, here's what we've got left. This is where we can provide water for you. And after that, you help us figure out if you need more than that or not. And if so, at some point, I don't care where it goes, as long as we get paid the money out the end of the pipe. I don't really care where it goes, but we've got to have that capacity.
As long as ETJ remains in the crosshairs of the General Assembly, and it looks like it's going to, it may go away tomorrow. Just be a year from now. This may be your one and only planning tool for what the outside surrounding area of the town looks like.
And the other thing that we have done.
Absolutely.
The other thing we have done is we have followed the principles of the UDO. And a lot of times government's bad to, you'll do a document, so this is a good idea. Then you do another document, this is a good idea. And these two documents don't match up. One of the things this does is it takes your UDO and puts those, Derek, what's the term I'm looking for?
Principles.
The principles of growth, the cluster development. Instead of sprawling out, you control the growth where you want it to go, so that you can provide the services that they need. You don't want things to spread out so that people can't get the services that they deserve. You've got to work with those folks. This helps give you and them a planning tool to figure that out in the process.
All right. And just want to piggyback on what the manager said. The principle of growth number 7, as I stated earlier, says the citizens of Franklin have made significant investments in town infrastructure. And nothing ever rings more true than when you see people coming in every month paying their water bill. And I think this plan, it looks out for those people and ensures that they're going to have water not only today but for years in the future. It takes care of the town, and it's got potential, like John said, to be an excellent planning tool and determine what the boundary outside the town is going to look like, and how much we want to keep growth within our surrounding, within our municipal capabilities as far as with the infrastructure. Appreciate it.
All right. Questions?
One thing I'd like.
Billy.
One thing quick. When Derek started this, I kind of didn't know where we were headed on any of this. And then W.K. Dixon came in and started talking about populations, and I'm not a real big fan of that, of doing things like that. But Derek has taken everything down and just put it into a formula, into an equation that's very easy to figure and easy to see. And I guess one thing I want to say is it's really, really nice to sit up here when you've got staff that's capable of putting together something like that.
He didn't do
He
this.
runs
He hasn't slept in weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we could go out and hire
Oh,
people
absolutely.
and pay them $50 to $60 to $70,000, but we got a lot of folk that work for the town.
For a 3-month study that we've done.
That can take care of the problems that
You
we
know?
look at day-to-day here, so I'm very proud.
I can't take all the GIS and all the, when I talk about drawing these 400-foot boundaries around the corridors, that was just an idea. To put legs on that idea, I have to go
You
and,
just got a compliment, you can now.
I gotta get, I'd like, Justin Setzer was a huge help for this. He donated this.
He went for the county.
Yeah.
Good job, is that what you're saying, Dennis?
Good job.
Extra, yeah, you can.
All right. Yeah, but you ain't through yet, Dan.
What?
Let's go ahead and go to G, and then we'll come back to F. Get there.
Parallel parking study.
You want me to go ahead, Mr. Mayor?
Let's go on the update on the gazebo. Give,
Couple of things that are in depth in our planning process on what we're going to do with gazebo. I have been working on some input from the stakeholders, the different organizations, the different groups that actually either use the facility or in some way, form, or fashion are connected to that facility. What my intent is to develop 2 options for you, and I would love to bring them back to you hopefully at the next meeting in September. And after I get a little more input from those folks and get some designs on paper and get some ideas, bring 2 options to you as a board and say, okay, here's option number 1. We will strike everything off the face of the earth that's up there and start over, and here's what the new one would look like. Option number 2 is we're limited on funds. Let's do what we need to do to something that's up there to improve what's there and build on what's there and come up with the option for that and bring that back to you as a board next month to look at. At that point, after you pretty much think which direction you might want to go, I think we need to open it up to the public and get some input from the public, because honestly, these are the folks that really use this a lot. We're paying the bill. Ultimately, we have to write the check and pay the bill, but a lot of these different agencies that use that facility, it's very important that we make sure we accommodate them. I had grand ideas. I will tell you, now that Billy's bragging on staff, I'll tell you that that I had grand ideas and thought that we could fit this in and have this done probably by Pumpkin Fest in October, sometime in that time frame. I'll be honest with you, that's not going to happen. If we could, I could have a drawing done tomorrow and do a contract and have it done in a month, but it might be my idea and it might not be the public's.
We don't need to rush.
So in the best interest of everyone involved, to make sure that we do something that's correct and we don't go back and have to do it again, I think we're going to need a little more time to make that happen, and to get that input from folks and to have time to look at these different options. So it's not going to be an overnight project by any means, but we are making some direction, and I would love to have you some stuff back next month. The second part of that equation is the lease on the property, because we don't actually own the property. We have 5 years left on the lease up there before Macon County has to renew our lease. I have officially sent the request to Jack Orton, Board of Commissioners, to extend our lease. The last one was a 20-year lease, to at least do 20 years if at all possible, whatever they can legally do. And then at that point, in conjunction with this, hopefully by the time we get nailed down with a semi-solid design that we think we're going to do, the lease will be extended so that we know if we're going to invest that significant capital in there, that we can, we'll have some assurances that we're going to be on solid ground with them. And then even then, after that fact, the way the lease is written, as the owner of the property, they have to approve the design of whatever's done up there. So even after we do the lease, once we do the design, we got to get it back to them. So when you're involving 2 different governments, it's not going to be an overnight process. But we are making some progress.
in the meantime, we have like it's always been up on the square, and I, for one, really sense that most of the public would prefer us to regain the use of it or recontinue the use of the square.
Yeah.
This location aesthetically is great. It certainly is a good investment for the town in that with the events that we have, to have a venue, and it's not a terribly expensive project. We have a lot of help even from the veterans. I just don't think it's caught on like picking on the square where it started. And I, for one, I know that we've been in touch with Donnie. I think that he certainly knows that he'll set it up forever. Somebody jump in this conversation. You know where I'm heading with this. I want us to get picked on the square, backed up to the square for the time period until we actually need to go ahead and implement our remodel.
So you're wanting to do it before, Mr. Mayor? Use what we have right now?
I want to do it like a week from Saturday, if not a Saturday, you know, just as soon as you can effectively get the switch.
Well, if we're not gonna tear it down.
I did ask Donnie Clay that question. I met with him as one of the stakeholders in this the other day, and I did ask that question, and his answer to me was obviously wherever it's gonna be, he'll have it, wherever that decision made. He did tell me his preference would be to stay down here to try it the full season, so we don't switch midstream. Now, did we make the wrong decision when we started down here this year? I'm not one to say it.
It's not a matter of that.
I also can't speak for the general public either. I haven't
The general
heard a
public's
lot of
looking at
either
me.
way.
I think this is a wonderful asset out here. Other functions can be done
Absolutely.
here.
It's
You know,
not a
you've made
mistake
something-
at all. I don't
Like
think.
movies and slide shows and stuff. That's be fine.
Sure, that's
What about the west side over here?
With all that's going on in the town, you know, it's, that can always work good as a secondary place where people can
Yeah.
do this or that.
Sure.
I think it's an asset to the town to have
You talking about out
an
here?
alternate.
Absolutely. We don't have a lot of money invested in this. It's done, you know. But how do we feel about picking back up?
I think that once this remodeling's done, or whatever they do, but right now you've got September, August, September, and part of October. And I think to move it again, I just think we
People
need
would
to
switch
finish
them.
it where it is.
Well, tell me this, if we do your schedule, Warren, and you're able to present some ideas and start working, when would you anticipate that we would be able to go up there and start working?
I don't think we'll be starting anything before or after picking. I'll be honest.
So you think nothing's gonna happen till after that?
Knowing that we've got to go through the lease process, the design process, we do all get your approval, get some public input, get it to the board of commissioners and have them approve the design since we're building it on their property, I'm seeing several months.
Because they stop in October, right?
Let me ask this, if we don't, let's just say with that time schedule prevails. How long into next spring would we still be up there trying to?
We just don't know.
To do this? I mean, any ideas? I mean, because I'm thinking.
It depends on what we decide to do for one thing, whether we dig it all out and start from scratch or not, but I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, no, that's, you're telling me exactly what I'm.
Yeah,
what I'm-
we're not even there on the vision yet. You
No.
know, we don't know whether.
So I'm wondering if we move it back up there, are we still gonna have to maybe move it back down here for the first of next year?
We'll have to move it back down here as quick as we get ready to break ground up there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any events that would normally go up there is probably gonna be down here, whether it's picking.
During
or
the
it's other
construction
things.
process,
Yes,
for
yes.
safety reasons and just for logistics.
Yeah.
I just see a lot of weeks between now and then, and I just sense, at the folk festival, that's what caught my ear. I mean, I'm not, I don't go to picking that often, but folks tell me about that the numbers are down, the vendors say their sales are down. I'm getting emails from people in Florida who say they've come up annually for picking, and they say it's just not the same.
You'd be amazed at the folks that come here from everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't have any
Donnie
objection,
not
just,
asked
as
if
far
they
as
would
moving.
the next day.
But a lot of them ain't there because the numbers are down.
If it won't interfere, I don't have any.
I don't have a
objection
problem
to it.
moving it back.
Well, I've got kind of a flying ordinance here. What in the world is the square not suitable for that we can improve on? Are we wanting to build an amphitheater? I mean,
And that's, to answer your question, Bob, maybe nothing, and
If we get
that's
to-
why I wanted to give you the two options of,
Yeah.
okay, this
That
is
could
tearing
be option
everything
three. That
out.
could be option three, if we figure that nothing is cost effective.
The other option may be renovating what's there, improving the sound system, because that's the biggest complaint I've heard is the sound.
Right, and that's something that
And that may be where you want to spend your money
could
at.
be remedied very reasonably. I don't know, and the other thing with the square dances, having never been a clogger, I can't say about that concrete floor. But if you did the kind of square dancing we did coming up, you didn't clog, it was the round square dance, and I guess it would work for that. But I've been thinking about it, there've been some proposals too from various people in the town about some things, and I don't know whatever happened to them.
Right now, the issue that is before us is, are we considering as a board to suggest or otherwise direct that for the remainder of this season to locate back up on the square? That, I believe, is about all we need.
That's all we need to make a decision.
Right now,
Yeah.
tonight. We're not gonna decide on our vision, we're not gonna decide whether it's cost effective, but I
Discussion, and it's appropriate, I would like to make a move that we move it back down to the original place for the rest of the season.
on the schedule that works for Donnie, whether it be this.
With Donnie's approval, obviously.
Donnie needs to have say something.
But he already said he would be willing.
His comment to me was, he prefers to be here, but essentially, if that's what it requires to make picking work, then he'll make it.
I think that's kind of the center of town.
Mhm.
There's parking all the way around. This, the ones that I've talked to, this is kind of odd to them. It's right here at the top of Town Hill. And even though they know there's other places to park, it's not as convenient as going into Macon Bank, going behind the courthouse.
There's not
Or
as much
going down
people
on Back
walking.
Street, behind Stewart Street. Everybody, they walk.
You leaving on this one, Derek?
Put it back up on the square, that's what everybody wants, and you know it. Good night.
Has a hot date.
More discussion? No, did you make a motion?
Yes, I did.
Made a motion.
Is there a second?
Nobody wants to move it?
Well, I mean, I really don't mind, I mean, I just.
I'll second
So that, we got a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? I mean, this isn't,
Right.
Well, I haven't heard anybody say
No.
to keep it down here. All the comments, just like your comments that I've heard, is
Some of the store
they
people.
like it a lot
Okay.
better. These are from some of the people out of town.
Yeah.
We need to move it back.
so it's motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay.
Very.
Hallelujah. Okay.
All right, now, next one. Derek, get back up here. You've been studying water, you've been studying Gaston and Green Street, now let's talk about,
Tell us how to park cars.
that's right.
Just basically, we had discussed with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. They have a division that comes in and looks at this kind of thing, parking studies and things of that nature. I got in contact with the gentleman down there, and he had happened to be doing a study over in Murphy and was able to swing by and just do Franklin on the way. And so you have in your agenda packet a map number 3 on that email, the second, if you'll go back.
All right, now we know what that map's.
Number 3.
And that is the results of this study. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Manager, there's 69
Yes.
parking places that will be down Main Street, starting at the top of Town Hill and Stewart's Jewelry here and going down to past Motor Company Grill, right there at the intersection of Harrison Avenue and Main Street, right there at the Bryant Funeral Home. There are currently 76 to 77 parking places that we have diagonally right now. And so basically, in a nutshell, what we have here is if we turn parking parallel down Main Street, we can lose potentially 7 to 8 parking places.
How many said it again?
We got 76 to 77 right now. And that proposal with it turned parallel will have 69. So you're looking at losing 7, 8 spaces, turning it parallel. Yes, sir.
Quick question. When this first started floating around, we talked about making Main Street two-way again. Is this taking account the two-way?
No, that's primary
single
parking
lane,
study.
I mean, double lane traffic one way.
Yeah, that just, yeah.
All right, so you think that's out of the question now, the two-way?
Well, the two-way's never really been addressed fully by the board.
Oh, I know, but it's been batted around.
It has, but right now, the real issue is whether or not we want to take the step. What's apparent is, we're gonna have to strike in one form or fashion, most of it anyway, because they're just gone. The stripes are just, they're just gone. And I, for one, am so tired of seeing even our trucks, our own trucks, regularly parking with one, if not two wheels up on the sidewalk. Not just our folks. I mean, some of them are the double long trucks, and they feel like they have to get the rear end. They're building bigger trucks. I think it's a safety issue. I think it's opening up, making a width, and I know that I'd love to have 69 cars on Main Street. When's the last time we've seen? If we had 69 there, I'd say the town's doing something good. We'd find some way to get a parking lot, whatever. But I'm not concerned about losing a few spaces if, in fact, it would have the final result of keeping the tires off the sidewalk and keeping the rear ends out of Main Street. Sometimes it gets down to one lane.
You can't, it's hard to go through there. There's usually a truck on the left, a truck on the right. You actually have to stop and wait for traffic to go by on the right-hand side and then move out into that lane. Get around some of these trucks. It's just the way the trucks are designed, and especially if they've got a big grease hitch on the back of it.
Would this change that?
Well, then we'd have to have somebody to enforce that. We'd have to have somebody write a ticket if they did, and we could do it.
When you go down Main,
I think money, Sissy. I
Mr.
think
Mayor,
money.
when you go down the street and watch people back out as you're watching and you try to stop them, you can see they're so hesitant backing out because they cannot see when they're backing out. Is traffic coming, isn't it? It's just not a good angle to be able to see what's coming at them.
Well, the size of these spaces, now if you have one of those trucks that stick out the way it is now, can one of those get in one of these spaces?
I think that what's proposed on that drawing, as I remember it, is there's those curb cutouts or those jut outs that you'll see placed throughout that happens to be referenced in our Main Street master plan as well, with that they have drawn that in there with some landscaping and things like that. Really helps the streetscape. They're proposed in that drawing, which basically the way I figure it is they would be able to come in, and that jut out on the curb would serve kind of as a barrier to the rest of the street. In other words, they're going to be within the means of that jut out because they're not going to be wider. They could just be longer, but they'll never be to a point where they're wider than the curb cutout that shields those. In other words, so when he's parking parallel, he's parking over here, he's going to have to go in behind this curb and park like this.
Are we talking about a substantial investment of money if we go to this?
They didn't include.
It would need some, yes, not as much, Bob, to answer your question, as actually doing the two-way, because when you start changing the traffic lights and some of the bridge issues, that you're talking $1 millions. But it is substantial. It does fit into the main master plan for the streets, so obviously it does keep you on track of where you said you kind of wanted to be several years ago. I guess my caution would be from someone that doesn't like parallel park.
We forgot how.
9%. You would want to make sure that what you're doing, if you put 69 spaces in, you don't drop that to 35 because people won't park in the one between everybody, and make sure that we're not going to actually do some damage to the businesses. But other than that, that would be my only concern.
Also, if you have the jut outs and you have those, and you have the regular parking in those jut outs, That's gonna slow the traffic down,
They were doing a big.
and that's gonna keep a lot of those trucks out of there.
It would, if I'm reading everything correctly, it would widen both your travel lanes to 11 feet each.
As opposed to right now, the probably
Maybe 8, I don't know.
So you think it would make a significant difference in widening the?
It would increase your flow capabilities on Main Street.
Mr. Ritter's got his hand up over there.
I don't know,
Mr. Ritter, the.
Tom, what do you got?
Might have.
Go ahead.
well, I don't know that, do they teach parallel parking anymore? Because you've seen people try to parallel park.
If your
The
ticket's
big
made.
problem seems to be that a lot of people park and then hike to the sidewalk. They leave their car about halfway out there. Then the other problem is these dually pickup trucks that usually have big lights on the roof of them, you know, and all that, and they stick out. If we can have handicap parking and we can set up places for motorcycles and all, why can we not ban those type of trucks on Main Street and have them go to other parking areas? That would clear up so much of this.
On Silver, the UPS.
Right.
Because it's stopping right in the middle of the street and
Right.
everybody's having a duck full.
Sure.
Tom, what you got?
But that's 5 parking spaces that you're going to use up with handicap and loading zones. You will certainly increase the westbound traffic aisle by 2.5 feet each lane. You mentioned it a couple of times. When's the last time you've parallel parked? You'll be behind somebody that is going to take 5 attempts to get that car in there. Angled parking is angled for a reason. It's easier to get in, easier to get out.
It's not easier to get out.
Angled
It's
parking.
on Main Street. No, you can see, you can look at your rearview mirror if you parallel park.
Depending upon what's parked next to you, certainly. I'm one of those guys, an F-150 with a trailer hitch. It's not a dually, but it sticks out in the road.
Until you
I
put it
don't
up
want
on
to
the
surprise
sidewalk.
somebody with my trailer hitch. So you pull up on the curb.
Can I ask one quick question? We've got a real expert on traffic. Matt, what do you think? I just like to hear what the law enforcement thinks about parallel versus diagonal parking.
I'm like you, I don't prefer parallel parking by choice. That is going to increase a lot of accidents as far as parallel parking. You know, people coming back in this spot.
You have to judge that, you're gonna have, they're gonna
Yeah.
stop traffic.
Okay, I think I can get us there.
I don't want a camera on me.
If we were gonna consider what would be the next step, somebody have to do a schematic of some sort. If we were to consider it, to see about, well, where the jut out tonight.
We have this in the master plan.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I can't tell from this. This is one.
This doesn't tell
I
me.
have a tough time trying to envision from that.
The Silver's having the same exact problem.
Yeah, Silver's
Silver's
having-
doing a study
Line is right
now,
now.
behind to where you can't stick out. Beyond that, they're gonna angle them a little more.
Well, then you better have a cop there ready to write a ticket, and then somebody be able to go to court to testify whenever somebody challenges. I mean, it puts a whole layer of everything from start to finish if we're gonna have to try to enforce something like that.
Mr. Mayor, our best option tonight may be for you to accept this as information too and refer it back into the street and sidewalk folk and let us do a little more work on where we think we can go and how it fits into some of our other options.
Well, let's do it. While we're young, I'll take the heat for it. I'll take the heat for it. If they do want somebody, I'm going out the door anyway.
Is there anything else we can pack on?
All right, let's move on. Resolution for town, John Henry, tax collector.
Mr. Mayor, I think that this is going to be a real brief one. This is
Promises.
You are required periodically by state statute to charge your tax collector with collection of the taxes. I know that comes as a great shock, given that the position is called tax collector. But you do on occasion have to empower her and authorize your tax collector to collect the taxes through legal means available. That is what this is and does, and unless there are any questions about it, I would just recommend that you entertain a motion to accept it.
Make a motion to accept.
All in favor, raise your hand. Better be up, because this is, can't be disappearing ink here. Pass it down. Nonprofit funding pool applications are due Monday, August 26, 2013. Get that out to the newspapers, please, and other media. Monday, August 26, 2013. I'm assuming that's by the end of the business day.
Yes, sir.
Town Hall, we close Monday, September 2nd, in observance of Labor Day. So our next meeting will be bumped to Tuesday, September 3rd, 7 p.m. It's been a very good meeting. Anybody else got business before the board?
Let's ask Derek another question.
Motion to adjourn, Sissy? Billy, second. All in favor, raise your hand. Man, I tell you what, I know, Derek.